All right, I have 9 o'clock, so let's go ahead and get started. Good morning, everyone. Today's September 25th, and welcome to today's Washington Fire Weather Briefing. I am Logan here in Seattle, and joining with me from Spokane is Dan. And just as a reminder, this meeting is being recorded. By joining and participating in this session, consent is being given to the recording. Please keep your cameras off per the NOAA Privacy Act statement. All right, so taking a look at this morning's satellite imagery here, you can see here in Washington, we're under mostly zonal flow here. But as you can see with kind of the cloud pattern there over the Pacific, we do have some troughs coming in that will impact the weather this weekend and into early next week. Looking here at our current satellite over the state, you can see here we do still have some low clouds and fog there over portions of western Washington. Mostly clear skies over eastern Washington, but you can still see those fires there putting out quite a bit of smoke across the area. Taking a look here at our fire weather matrix. For Western Washington here, no fire weather concerns through the week. We are quite a bit cooler today than we have been the past couple days. And then with that, a little bit of a pattern change as we get some frontal systems moving through with some slight chances for showers, mostly over Northwest Washington on Friday. With better chances of widespread redding rains Sunday and into next week. With that, I will turn it over to Dan for Eastern Washington and North Idaho.
Yeah, thanks, Logan. So the main focus of the briefing in the Eastern Washington and North Idaho is for today for the warm, dry, and windy conditions, especially in central and eastern Washington. But North Idaho also will see some of those warm, dry, and breezy conditions. And those conditions will continue in the overnight hours, especially into central Washington, and remain breezy into Friday morning. But then during the daytime Friday, those winds will start to taper off. And then, as Logan was hinting to, a pattern change kind of incoming. And then by early next week, our chances for showers increase and our fire weather potential looks low. That's it for that. So for this slide, this is the relative humidity recoveries this morning at all the sites over in Western Washington. Excellent recoveries in the 90s to near 100%, or at 100% in a lot of locations. But in central and eastern Washington and even North Idaho, especially at stations like above 3,000 feet, we're seeing very poor relative humidity recoveries in like the 20 to 40% range. And since I made this graphic, the relative humidities have dropped off quite a bit in some stations in central Washington, seeing as low as like 5 to 15%. So we're hitting those lows very early this morning. And this is just showing where the relative humidity recoveries were less than 55% this morning. And that's all limited to east of the Cascade Crest. And those very poor recoveries, as I was saying before, are pretty much above like 3,000 feet, but especially up to like above 5,000 feet, where a couple stations not shown here were showing less than 20% this morning. So the problem of the week is for today, pretty much now through tonight, wind and relative humidity widespread, critical east of the Cascade Crest, and some elevated conditions in northeast Washington and North Idaho. But for the areas in critical, generally expecting a westerly wind around 15 to 25 miles per hour, gusting up to 40 miles per hour or so, and then minimum RHs around 7 to 20-ish% today. And I mentioned some of the stations in like the higher elevations were seeing a very sharp decrease in relative humidity this morning. As the atmosphere begins to mix out, we could see that start to occur at some of the lower elevation sites like Wenatchee, Methow Valley, Omak, Douglas. So we'll be keeping an eye on those RHs rapidly decreasing into the late morning and afternoon hours, and in some places in North Idaho in the evening. And then as far as winds shifting, they'll kind of shift from west, southwest, kind of this morning to like northwest over north central and northeast Washington. So, uh, kind of like going from a southwesterly to a northwesterly, and then eventually, like, those speeds will slow down into tomorrow morning. So that's all for this slide. And then this is the hot, dry, windy index, which incorporates temperature and the vapor pressure deficit. So this is near Moses Lake, showing above 95th percentile conditions expected today. So we're on edge quite a bit watching the conditions start to develop today with those critical fire weather conditions. And then another signal that we were seeing was, especially for like the Labor Mountain and the Sugarloaf fire, strong winds continuing in the Cascades Thursday night with some mountain wave activity expected. Could see northwest winds gusting around 30 to 50 miles per hour well into the overnight hours. The image I grabbed on the left is actually showing like high end potential of what the wind gust could look like around 2 a.m. And that's showing like pretty widespread 30 to 50 miles per hour on those fires. So we'll be keeping a very close eye on this.
Sweet. Thanks so much. That's all we have for the slides here, so we'll move on. Um, here's to take a look at our current hazards. Dan, you want to say anything here for the red flag warnings?
I don't think so. I kind of pretty much touched on the conditions expected and how they'll be slowly decreasing into Friday morning.
Okay, perfect. So we'll move on to today's weather forecast. So for max temperatures here in Western Washington, we'll be quite a bit cooler than we were yesterday with highs in the 60s, perhaps near 70 in the southern part of the region. And then over in Eastern Washington, we have 70s and 80s across much of the Columbia Basin, as well as and into North Idaho there. Our minimum relative humidities with stronger onshore flow in Western Washington will be quite a bit more humid with our min RHs in the 50s and 60s across most of the area, a little bit drier in the higher elevations of the Olympics and kind of into the Gifford-Pinchot forest, though on Eastern Washington, as Dan was mentioning, min RH is below 20% across the entire area, as well as reaching around 10%. Through much of central and eastern Washington. And then taking a look at those winds here, you can see mostly light onshore flow winds across western Washington, and then across eastern Washington, as Dan was mentioning, those stronger winds, especially across central Washington into the Waterville Plateau there, where we could see peak winds 30 to 40 miles per hour, potentially locally higher, as Dan was mentioning with those previous slides there. And then just to highlight kind of the rainier pattern that we were looking at across the area, I'll show here the QPF for the next 7 days. If this wants to load, which apparently does not. But anyways, oh, there we go. The story here is a much rainier pattern here. We could see widespread wetting rains across Washington. especially Sunday through the beginning of next week, as we have several frontal systems traversing the area here. Now moving on to trends here, we'll show Ashford for Western Washington. You can see across Western Washington, we'll have seasonable to relatively cool conditions with good relative humidities throughout the entire period here. Winds will remain relatively light. We'll kind of switch between onshore during the day, a little light offshore during the night, but more solidly kind of southerly to westerly winds across the area. And you can see here the chances for precip going up, especially Sunday into Monday and kind of persisting into the beginning of next week. So now we will show Douglas here. Dan?
There it is. All right, thanks, Logan. So the trends that we're looking at are mild temperatures persisting for the next several days in like the low to mid 70s, with today being the driest day in central Washington. Relative humidities dipping down into the low teens and potentially single digits. And then as we get into early next week, we'll see some better relative humidity recoveries at night, especially as we get beyond like Monday, like above 70 to even 80%. And then as far as the winds go, today, this afternoon is going to be the peak. That yellow line is showing like sustained winds up to 28 miles per hour out of the west. This afternoon at Douglas on the Waterville Plateau, and then those wind speeds will decrease to like less than 10 miles per hour through the rest of the period, like after Friday morning, like I was mentioning before, and then increasing cloud cover into the weekend and early next week, and with that will come the chances for showers that Logan was touching upon. A little bit less so on our side, just with the rain shadow present, but looking like a 30 to 40% chance of showers in central Washington. And then this is for Priest Lake, kind of the same idea, where today will be the kind of warmest, driest, and breeziest day. And then we're having pretty good humidity recoveries through the whole period up in North Idaho, especially in those sheltered valleys, but still a couple days of dry conditions in the afternoons with relative humidities dipping into the upper teens into low 20s. But same idea for precipitation chances kind of increasing Monday and into mid next week. Chances in Idaho and like the northern mountains in Washington and like the Cascade Crest, those are where the chances are really going to be maximized for rains. I think, yeah, the Priest Lake point here, it's showing pretty widespread chances for about 40% chance of showers. So that's welcome to see.
Definitely. And then just to finish off here real quick, we'll show the 8 to 14 day outlook. And you can see here all across Washington, we are leaning above normal for temperatures and also above normal for precipitation. So hopefully we'll keep seeing those rains across the area. I think that is all we have for today. Anything else, Dan, before we wrap up?
No, thanks for leading it today.
Yeah, of course. We'll go ahead and stop the recording here and we'll hold